20146, your SMS line at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. I am at Kiage Simba. Welcome to your official economic review this morning. We're joined by Collins. Collins, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Happy to have you around. Let's talk about these issues this morning. Now, Kenya's level of public debt rose to 7.352 trillion shillings in January, according to data released by the Central Bank of Kenya. Now, this denotes a 20% year-on-year growth in the country's level of public debt between January 2020 and January 2021. This means, therefore, that the National Treasury borrowed, wait for it, 3.385 billion shillings daily over the 12-month periods. External debt now accounts for 52% of Kenya's public debt at 3.819 trillion shillings, while domestic debt, which is referred to debt taken out through treasury bills and bonds, accounts for the remaining 48% at 3.532 trillion shillings. Just before we cross over to Collins this morning, let's look at what we have this morning in terms of our public debt, and that data all the way from January 2020 to where we are in January 2021, which denotes a big increase, and that's where we are. That's 7.3 trillion. Well, Rich, that's not the one that we need to run into. Thank you very much. That is on non-performing loans. Let's look at that Kenya's public debt. Good again, all the way from January to 2021 of January. That's from January 2020 to January 2021. You're gonna see exactly again in terms of that external debt, which was to around 3.819 billion shillings. And then if you look at that external debt as well, your domestic debt, which is going to show you quarter by quarter domestic debt growth, you can actually see that all the way up to that level that we have there. The graph really showing that by quarter analysis shows you that we have been increasing that debt, which leads to this data that we have here, that it was a 20% year-on-year increase. That data, which is going to be basically just a broader perspective of that data that we're going to show you here, that we've shown you here this morning. Now, Collins, what does a 20% year-on-year increase debt level in the country mean for the country's debt management? Because the communication that we're receiving from the Treasury Office is that we are moving closer and closer to achieving those healthy levels in terms of our debt management.
Thank you, Charles. Allow me first, before I comment on that, to offer my condolences to the family of my chairman of Kenya National Breakfast, that is Honorable Paul Koinange, Member of Parliament, Kiambaa. That said, let me paint the we have insofar as the debt management is concerned in this country.
Yes.
Let's take, for instance, 2020, June to November, where we collected revenue of around 530 billion. That if you break that down in a month, it's like something close to 110 billion per month. If you use that figure of 110 billion per month, we spend out of that 110 billion per month, 90 billion in public wages and in servicing interests. You know, the biggest problem in payment of debt is the interest. So we spend that of those interests and also in public wages. From that 110, that 90 billion, we remain 30 billion in a month, then it means we've remained with nothing. Remember, we have not spent anything on healthcare, we have not spent anything on development projects for that month, we have not spent anything on other expenditures that need to be, even in that out of that 110 billion, to mean we will have to borrow around 90 billion in that month.
Yes.
So in every month, all our expenditure as a government has been debt. That you're saying, for instance, if you look at the whole financial year, we are saying that we've spent almost half of our budget in financing our debt. And if you look at that, out of that half is in payment of the interest. To me, this situation has not been even compounded with COVID. If anything, COVID just tipped the scale, and we use it as a catalyst. But to be honest, I think our debt management is in a crisis, and we need to have a holistic conversation on how to salvage the situation. The numbers that are coming out from the treasury are nothing further from the truth. And if we are going to talk about debt management today, we'll need to talk about issues to do with even the debt ceiling that we imposed. Just us going to the Paris 320 Club, issues to do with we are going the DSSS, such kind of things. We have to talk about all of that and the kind of situations that they are putting us in place now. That we sort of reduced ourselves. For the longest time, Kenya has held itself out as a frontier market. That we can go for loans. We can account for the loans that we ask for. We're in a situation whereby we are going for Paris 320 Club loans. We used to the level where we are. Now we are going for loans that are given to, for lack of a better word, poor countries. To me, market, we can't say we are big boy now, that we can even have a dialogue have a conversation on the kind of loans that we want. We are getting into dire situations, and I think COVID is making this even worse. The kind of leadership we have is making this more worse. For process of vaccine, even we'll have it will be successful for people to get the second jab because of issues to do with expenses. So for me, I think this morning the situation as far as our debt is concerned is so bad. The government is not doing anything in that end.
Pretty much. Now, Colin, somebody's going to ask you, though, from when you seated this morning, now we do know the conversation that Treasury is pushing in the National House is to have our debt ceiling increased, Collins. Well, if you look at that data on exactly the way in which we're consuming debt, would you say that, well, we could solely therefore go back and say we are in this situation because of the COVID-19 pandemic? Case in point, depressed collections within the country that at that time when we were supposed to start restructuring or continue this talk and this move towards restructuring our loans, that's when we got into the COVID-19 pandemic effects on the economy. Would you say that that could be a case that we can rely on, Collins?
Not really. I have been to blame on the debt ceiling. I mean, I don't think debt ceiling is sufficient to impose financial discipline in this country as it is. Well, debt ceiling parameter that we can use to assess the kind of spending we have. Remember, if the shilling to fall, if the change rate is to fall, then it's going to affect the debt ceiling either way, whether we've borrowed or not. As it is, it's going to affect it.
Yes.
So for me, I think the situation that we're in, it's really about financial discipline, and that comes out of political goodwill. It's not something that we are going to impose a debt ceiling. That said, we are going to increase it anyway. And it's very easy to increase. The government finds itself in a position whereby it needs to borrow more. It just goes back to Parliament, tells Parliament we want to borrow, and this thing is capping our borrowing, and you paint the picture to Parliament, and Parliament just increases it. If anything, it will be legal in those confines, and that is not. And that's what I'm saying. It's not a good parameter to talk about insofar as our nini is concerned. Insofar as
Well, we seem to have momentarily lost Collins.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can get you now, Collins.
Oh, sorry. Using the debt ceiling is not a tangible, or rather, it's not a congent parameter for us to. Yeah. But that said, COVID-19 has compounded this situation. But be that as it may,
Yes.
what kind of revenue are we getting out of this COVID? For instance, look at the new position of the lockdown, that the president just woke up one day and thought and felt that it's important for him to close the economy. It's important for him to not give relief packages that he had given before, that you can shut down industries, for instance, the eateries and the bars and restaurants and all that, tourism, and then you still expect that the economy to resuscitate itself. I don't understand why. But finally, I think even in this issue of vaccine, and I know from WHO, vaccines ought to be very free. But if we are in the position that we are in as a country, for me, I think people like members of parliament should be able to purchase their vaccines, so that the monies that they're using in purchase of their vaccines should be going towards repayment of that debt that you are asking for purposes of procuring vaccines.
Yes.
You're not going to put all of us in the same pedestal. A Kenyan who is not employed because of issues, and now us because to their businesses is now they are being to again shut down their businesses.
So let's look at exactly the data that we have this morning, Collins, again on the way in which we're consuming debt in the country. Now, we do know that last year we did negotiate for a 263 billion IMF fund into the country that came in terms of a 38-month credit facility. Now, we do know that the 34.45 billion is supposed to come into the country anytime soon. So this is what was pretty much a second renegotiation after we had gone earlier on to IMF and actually told them exactly where the country was in terms of this COVID-19 fight in the country. So we do expect that this is going to come into the country, but that means, Collins, you factor this in. If you look at the 8 months through to February 2021, our debt service payments have been more than our recurrent expenditure. Now, Collins opens a very interesting talking point, because we know recurrent expenditure has been one of those issues that have been a problem from this country as well. Well, you factor that in, and then you say, well, now the problem is no longer that recurrent expenditure, which has been an issue to bring down. It has been the debt service repayments that we're making, which have been more than that recurrent expenditure. From where you said it this morning, what position therefore, what picture do you want to paint around these two scenarios when you're saying a recurrent expenditure now all the way to 8 months of February 2021 has been lesser than our debt service repayments?
Thank you, Charles. And that's what really I was talking about in the first instance when I was painting that picture. I was just trying to say that the situation as it is now, it's very dire. And you see now we are being forced to start borrowing from IMF, World Bank, AFD. That's where we'll start borrowing. And you know terms that their loans comes with. I mean, you have to account for every penny that you're spending. And I know the government was very much reluctant to going that route, because this government as it is, it's very afraid of matters to do with the accountability. But the situation as it is now, even beyond looking at the situation as it is now, I think the kind of terms of contracts, or rather the kind of loan agreements that we get in